It was supposed to be just another busy lunch rush in Briarwood. A mild Wednesday, the first warm day of spring break, when families poured out into the sunshine looking for somewhere, anywhere, to grab a quick bite. By 12:06 p.m., Briarwood Burger Stop was already humming like a well-oiled machine. The scent of sizzling patties hung thick in the air, wrapping itself around the hiss of fryers and the metallic hum of the milkshake machine. Kids laughed as they pressed their noses to the glass dessert case. Parents balanced trays and toddlers in equal measure. High schoolers in gym shorts clustered in the corner, teasing each other over extra-large sodas. It was loud, messy, and warm. Exactly what you'd expect from a small-town fast food joint in the middle of its lunch peak. And behind the counter stood Marcus Hale, 27 years old. Tall, slender, always clean-shaven. His red visor sat perfectly straight, his black apron spotless. To most, he was just another worker. Quiet, polite, the kind you barely noticed. Customers saw him smile faintly as he handed out trays. Coworkers saw him moving with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. But beneath that stillness, there was something else. Something no one in the building could see. Not the mother unwrapping her toddler's burger. Not the youth pastor picking up fries for his Bible study group. Not the mayor's secretary, tapping her watch as she waited for her milkshake. Because Marcus wasn't just serving lunch. He was counting. Counting trays. Counting faces. Counting seconds. And somewhere, hidden in plain sight, was the key to what he had come here to do. Outside, across the street, the town's playground was filling with children fresh from their meals. Their laughter drifted faintly through the burger stop's open door. The kind of sound that should bring comfort. But today, it was only a clock, ticking towards something no one could yet imagine. In just under an hour, 17 people would be dead, and it would all trace back to this moment. To this warm afternoon in Briarwood. To the man at the counter whose steady hands hid a storm he had been building for months. They would call it the Briarwood Massacre. They would speak of it in whispers for years. And for the people inside that red brick building, they would remember the smell of grease, the buzz of the milkshake machine, and the calm, unshakable gaze of Marcus Hale. Right before everything came apart. For almost 3 years, Marcus Hale had been part of the furniture at Briarwood Burger Stop. Not the squeaky chair you notice. Not the neon sign you can't miss. No, Marcus was the background. A steady pair of hands. Always on time. Never complaining. He was the kind of employee managers like to forget about, not because he was bad, but because he never caused trouble. Orders went out on time. Surfaces stayed clean. Customers got their meals without fuss. For a long while, that seemed enough. But in Briarwood, people like Marcus don't get noticed until something goes wrong. 6 months before that spring day, small cracks began to show. A missed sauce count here. A mislabeled tray there. Nothing major. Nothing worth firing over. But enough to put his name on a few write-ups. Still, Marcus kept his head down until the day the regional manager came to visit. They needed a new assistant manager. Marcus had been there the longest. He'd trained half the kitchen. He thought, just maybe, this was his moment. It wasn't. The job went to Chloe Barnes, a 17-year-old high school senior who had been working there for only 6 weeks. Blonde, bubbly, always laughing too loud. She called Marcus Hale like it was a joke between friends. It wasn't. The promotion hit him like a slap. Something inside him tightened that day and never really let go. After that, Marcus stopped eating in the break room. He took his lunches in the supply closet, sitting on a crate of paper cups, staring at the wall. No more small talk. No more have a good night. When customers tried to chat at the counter, he answered in clipped words, if he answered at all. His coworkers noticed, but no one asked. Because in a place like this, unless you're screaming, no one really hears you. Outside of work, his life wasn't faring any better. The rent was late. His phone had been shut off twice in 2 months. He applied everywhere, grocery stores, delivery services, even the janitor position at St. Luke's Church, but the callbacks never came. Or worse, they came with that same polite smile and empty promise. We'll be in touch. He started bringing a small notebook to work. Sometimes he wrote in it. Sometimes he just stared at the blank page. A coworker once saw a file open on his phone called In-Game and assumed it was about a video game. It wasn't. In the quiet spaces between shifts, Marcus began cataloging. Every insult, real or imagined. Every slight. Every time someone laughed when he walked by. He saw who got more hours. who left early without consequences, who got special treatment from the new assistant manager. And he remembered all of it. There was no shouting, no threats, no visible breakdown, just a slow, silent retreat from the world, like someone pulling back a curtain 1 inch at a time until all the light was gone. Marcus Hale had been invisible for years, but now he was choosing to disappear. And somewhere in that growing darkness, a plan was beginning to take shape. The day of the massacre didn't begin at noon. It began long before the sun was up. At exactly 5:47 a.m., the security camera at Briarwood Burger Stop caught the first shadow of the day. Marcus Hale, shoulders hunched, backpack slung low, moving with a quiet, deliberate purpose. The parking lot was empty. The restaurant lights were still dark. Even the birds hadn't started their morning chorus. Marcus was one of only 4 employees trusted with an opening keycard. That morning, he'd volunteered to start early. Nobody questioned it. He'd done it before. The door clicked open. No alarm sounded. He didn't go to the register. Didn't start coffee. Didn't head for the front prep station. Instead, he walked straight to the walk-in freezer. Inside, his breath turned white in the cold. The metal shelves were stacked high. Boxes of frozen onion rings, crates of sealed burger patties, tubs of prepped sauces. He crouched low, disappearing from the camera's view for a moment. When he stood again, there was something in his hands. Small, clear vials, unlabeled, carefully sealed. No rush, no hesitation. For the next 27 minutes, Marcus moved like a man following a blueprint only he could see. From the freezer to the dry storage. From the storage to the main kitchen. He flipped on the fryers, preheated the ovens, sanitized every visible surface. Everything exactly as he'd done hundreds of times before, until he reached the sauce station. Briarwood Burger Stop's pride was its signature dipping sauce, a tangy, creamy blend that customers drowned their fries in, slathered over burgers, even drizzled on chicken sliders. It was made fresh every 2 days, stored in a large industrial vat, then portioned into squeeze bottles throughout the day. Marcus stood over that vat, a long-handled mixing paddle in his hand. The sauce was already smooth, pale orange, flecked with seasoning. He stirred slowly. Then, from his apron pocket, he pulled the first vial. The liquid inside was colorless, odorless, silent. It caught the morning light for only a moment before vanishing into the sauce. Marcus kept stirring. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The texture never changed. The smell stayed the same. No bubbles, no cloudiness. When he was done, he sealed the vat, wiped the rim with a clean cloth, and washed the paddle until it gleamed. The empty vial disappeared back into his pocket. By the time the rest of the crew arrived at 6:30, the kitchen looked perfect. Timers were set. Counters gleamed. Sauce was ready to flow. No one asked why Marcus was already sweating. No one noticed the backpack tucked neatly under the prep table. No one checked the cameras. At 11 a.m., the doors opened to the first wave. Parents grabbing breakfast combos, a few retirees ordering coffee, one man in a suit rushing through a drive-thru pickup. But the real rush came at noon. And with it, the plan began. Marcus positioned himself exactly where he needed to be, between the assembly line and the sauce station. Close enough to control what went where, but not close enough to seem suspicious. Order by order, bottle by bottle, he worked the sauce in with surgical precision. Sometimes just a drizzle. Sometimes extra cups on the house. And always to the right people. Those on his list. Those he had been waiting for. To everyone else, Marcus looked like the hero of the shift. Fast, focused, picking up the slack from the flustered teen handling the drive-thru. But every smile, every enjoy your meal, was just another step toward what was coming. Because outside, across the street, the playground was already filling up. Children racing each other to the swings. Parents chatting on benches. And one by one, the poison began to work its way into their blood. It wouldn't hit right away. That was the genius and the horror of it. By 12:15 p.m., Briarwood Burger Stop was a machine running at full tilt. The red brick building shook with noise. Order numbers shouted over the sizzle of the grill, the hiss of fryers, the chatter of customers packed shoulder to shoulder. Families balanced trays through the crowd. High schoolers laughed too loudly near the soda fountain. The youth pastor from St. Luke's, Reverend Paul Mercer, ushered his Bible study group into the corner booth they always claimed. Even Sandra Dwyer, the mayor's secretary, was there, still wearing her county badge as she ordered her usual burger and shake. And Marcus Hale was in the middle of it all. He moved with unnerving calm. While the teen on drive-thru fumbled with headsets and dropped fries, Marcus was a picture of precision. He assembled meals like an artist, placing patties just so, lining fries in their trays, adding sauce with a flourish. And when the right customer came along, he made sure they got extra. Across the street, the playground was alive with the joy of spring break. Two siblings, Evan and Maya Carter, had just finished their chicken sliders, extra sauce, courtesy of Marcus himself. They were still licking their fingers when they raced toward the monkey bars. At first, everything seemed normal, until Evan's knees buckled. He slipped from the rope ladder and hit the mulch hard. His mother barely looked up from her phone. "Come on, honey, up you get." But he didn't get up. He didn't even answer. Then came the sound, violent, wrenching wrenches as his small body convulsed. Maya screamed. Their mother dropped her purse and ran, fumbling for her phone, calling 911 with trembling hands. But mid-sentence, her words slurred, and she folded forward, collapsing on top of her son. It started to spread, fast. Two toddlers near the slide began to cry uncontrollably. A boy clutched his stomach and vomited down the front of his shirt. One parent ran for their car, trying to drive their child to the hospital. Another flagged down a sheriff's cruiser, screaming for help. The 911 center would later describe it as a flood, call after call pouring in with the same panicked refrain. "My kid's sick. He can't breathe. Please send someone now." By the time paramedics arrived, the park looked like a scene from a chemical attack. Children lay limp in the grass. Adults were hunched over, pale and sweating. One officer doubled over after stepping out of his vehicle. Hazmat suits were rushed in because no one knew what they were dealing with. Back inside the burger stop, no one knew yet. The lunch rush didn't slow. Orders still flashed across the monitors. The soda fountain still hummed. Marcus kept moving, unfazed. Another burger. Another tray. Another squeeze of sauce. One more smile. One more. Enjoy your meal. If you looked closely, you might have noticed something odd. Marcus taking over trays that should have gone through Chloe Barnes, the new assistant manager. He told her it was just faster this way. She believed him. At 12:52 p.m., Marcus walked to the front doors and slid the manual deadbolt into place. The soft click went unnoticed by almost everyone. Almost. A teenage cashier glanced up. "Why'd you lock it?" Marcus's voice was steady, casual. "Just for safety." And he smiled. Across the street, sirens wailed. A fire engine roared past. A mother banged on the glass doors of the burger stop, shouting for someone to call an ambulance. But the noise inside drowned her out. The first symptoms began to show in the dining area. A teenage boy clutched his stomach, face draining of color. A woman ran for the restroom with her hand over her mouth. A little girl whimpered, holding her head in both hands. Still, no one connected the dots. They didn't know that of the 28 people Marcus had served that day, 11 had meals laced with poison, and 9 of those trays had come directly from his hands. The rest was just a matter of time. The bolt slid into place with the faintest click. So soft, so ordinary, that it vanished beneath the clamor of the lunch rush. But in that moment, the Briarwood Burger Stop stopped being a restaurant. It became a trap. Marcus Hale turned back to the counter, his face composed, his steps measured. To the untrained eye, he was just a hard-working crew member pushing through the chaos. But to Marcus, the chaos was cover. The teenage cashier barely noticed when he nudged her aside at the sauce station. "I've got this," he said, with that same polite half-smile. And now he had full control over every tray that left the counter. He moved with surgical precision, an extra cup here, a generous drizzle there. No hurry, no wasted motion. For some customers, their meals were perfectly ordinary. For others, their fates were sealed the moment the sauce hit their food. Outside, the street was a mess of sirens and flashing lights. Parents from the playground screamed for help, clutching limp children in their arms. An ambulance tore past, but inside the burger stop, the music still played faintly over the speakers. Pop songs, upbeat, cruel in their cheerfulness. A woman with short, cropped hair pushed against the locked glass doors, shouting something no one could hear. The customers inside glanced up briefly, then went back to their food. Maybe she was just trying to avoid the wait in the drive-thru. Marcus knew better. He didn't break eye contact with her as he slipped another cup of sauce onto a tray. The signs began quietly. A cough from the corner booth. A teenager leaning back against the wall, hand pressed to his stomach. A mother pausing mid-bite, frowning. Then, the sound of a tray clattering to the floor. A burger rolled under a table. A drink toppled, spreading a sticky, fluorescent puddle across the tiles. Marcus didn't flinch. The new assistant manager, Chloe Barnes, looked pale. She muttered something about needing air. Marcus told her to focus on the drive-thru. He'd handle the counter. By 1:05 p.m., the change in the room was impossible to ignore. A woman hunched over her table, her breathing shallow. A child whimpered, his fries untouched, head resting on the table's edge. Near the soda machine, a man gripped the wall, knuckles white, sweat dripping from his brow. But the real shift, the moment everything turned, came just after 1:09. A pregnant woman staggered toward the counter, one hand braced against it for balance. Her face was slick with sweat, her eyes glassy. She stared straight at Marcus. "What did you?" Her voice collapsed into a whisper. Then her knees buckled, and her full weight crashed onto the counter before hitting the tile floor with a sickening thud. The room froze. Marcus didn't move. He just looked down at her, one hand still resting lightly on the edge of the tray he was holding. Somewhere, a child began to cry. Someone else vomited into a napkin, and the air, already thick with fryer grease, was now tinged with something sharper. The smell of illness, of bodies starting to fail. Across the dining room, Chloe was on her phone, voice shaking, calling for help. The teenage cashier was rooted to the spot, eyes wide. Marcus set down the tray. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the refrigeration unit. Then, as if nothing had happened, he asked the nearest customer, "Would you like to try the combo?" At 1:39 p.m., the first police unit pulled into the Briarwood Burger Stop parking lot. Corporal Daniel Cross, a 12-year veteran of the Briarwood PD, stepped out into an eerie quiet. Half the lot was full, but no one was moving. No customers walking in or out. No chatter spilling from the open doors, because the doors were shut. Through the glass, Cross saw people slumped in booths. A woman gripping the soda machine with one hand, her head bowed. A child curled up in the corner of a seat, motionless. And then, he saw Marcus Hale. Marcus stood behind the counter, looking directly at him. Not waving. Not calling for help. Just watching. Cross tried the door. Locked. He knocked hard. A teenage employee shuffled toward him, but halfway across the floor, she stopped, her face twisted, her hands clutching her stomach. Marcus moved then. Not toward her, toward the door. He reached under the register, pulled the bolt, and let the door swing open. The smell hit Cross immediately. Grease, sweat, and something else, acrid, sour, unmistakably wrong. His boot slipped slightly on the tile. He looked down. Vomit. Thick, streaked, trailing behind the counter and into the kitchen. A woman was on her knees by the condiment station, gagging into her hands. A man nearby leaned forward, retching onto the floor. In the far booth, a boy lay face down, not moving. The teenage cashier stood frozen, tears tracking through her makeup. Her hands trembled as she tried to hand out napkins to no one in particular. Cross keyed his radio. Medical backup, now. As he moved toward the counter, a shadow fell across it. A pregnant woman staggered forward, one arm braced on the laminate, knuckles bone white. Her lips trembled. Her eyes locked onto Marcus. "What did you?" Her voice cracked. Her knees buckled. She collapsed against the counter, then slid to the floor. The thud made everyone flinch, except Marcus. Cross lunged forward, kneeling beside her. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow, her body convulsing in quick, jerking spasms. Behind him, the sharp sound of metal clattering, a tray hitting the tile. Then another. People were standing up only to stumble, to fall. One man vomited across the booth table before sinking into the seat, eyes rolling back. A scream echoed from the hallway leading to the restrooms, then was abruptly cut off. And Marcus just stood there. In his hands, still, steady, was a tray with a burger, fries, and a milkshake. He looked at Cross, tilted his head slightly, and in a voice so calm it was almost rehearsed, asked, "Would you like to try the combo?" Cross's jaw clenched. Hands on the counter. Now, Marcus obeyed, slowly, deliberately, placing his palms flat on the laminate. Two more officers burst through the door, weapons low but ready. One of them, Officer Jeremy Haynes, moved in to cuff Marcus. It should have been routine. But before the cuffs could click shut, Haynes faltered. His other hand went to his stomach. "Hey," the second officer began, but Haynes was already buckling to one knee, gasping, eyes unfocused. His body spasmed. It was only later they learned why. Minutes earlier, while waiting for backup, Haynes had taken a small paper cup from Marcus. A vanilla milkshake Marcus had said shouldn't go to waste. One sip. That's all it took. Haynes was dragged to safety. Medics rushing to inject him with antidotes they weren't even sure would work. He survived, but barely. Inside, the scene was collapsing into complete chaos. And Marcus Hale didn't resist, didn't speak, didn't even blink. The moment Corporal Daniel Cross identified Marcus Hale as the suspected source of the poisoning, everything changed. Rescue turned to containment. The officers shifted their stances, circling in closer, hands twitching toward their sidearms, eyes locked on the man at the counter. Marcus didn't run, didn't protest, didn't even ask why. He simply kept his palms flat on the laminate, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. A faint trace of something, satisfaction, flickered in his eyes. Two officers moved in cautiously. The younger, Officer Jeremy Haynes, was still being rushed outside to medics after collapsing from that poison milkshake. In his place, another officer stepped forward, pulling out a set of flex cuffs, latex gloves already snug over his hands. Standard procedure had shifted. Nobody wanted to touch Marcus directly. The cuffs clicked tight around his wrists. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. As they led him toward the door, the customers who were still conscious turned their heads, tracking him with hollow, fevered stares. One man muttered a curse. Another hurled an empty cup that bounced off Marcus's shoulder. He didn't react. Outside, the parking lot was no longer just asphalt. It was a triage zone. Medical tents had sprung up. Stretchers lined the sidewalk. Yellow police tape cut across the lot like a scar. News vans were already idling across the street, camera operators craning for a shot of the man in the red visor. Marcus was guided toward a waiting cruiser, his expression empty, his steps steady. He slid into the back seat without a word. The investigation began before the doors of the cruiser even closed. Hazmat teams moved inside, their boots sloshing through pools of spilled soda and half-melted milkshakes. They passed untouched meals still steaming on trays, ketchup packets scattered across tables, a crumpled napkin blotched with blood. The first stop was the walk-in freezer. One officer remembered seeing Marcus vanish into it early that morning, long before anyone else arrived. Security footage confirmed it. 5:47 a.m., Marcus enters with a full backpack. At 6:02, he emerges with nothing in his hands. The freezer's air bit like ice, but the real chill came from what they found. Behind a box of frozen onion rings, taped to the wall, was a plastic bag. Inside, 5 clear vials, each labeled only with a single digit, 1 through 5. The liquid inside was clear, still, almost innocent in appearance. Lab tests would later confirm it was a modified industrial preservative, engineered with toxic stabilizers to delay symptoms until it was too late. But that wasn't all. Just behind the freezer's coolant fan, they found a prepaid burner phone. No texts, no outgoing calls, but in its draft folder, 3 unsent messages. Targets. Plan A. Goodbye. The words inside were short, sharp, and chillingly efficient. Always the sauce. Easy, fast, discreet. If they won't listen to pain, I'll feed it to them. The search moved to Marcus's employee locker. It was the only one locked. When they cut it open, the smell of grease and something faintly chemical drifted out. Inside sat a spiral-bound notebook, its cover stained with dried sauce. On the first page, underlined in heavy black ink, were the words, "You fed me misery, I fed it back." What followed wasn't a random rant. It was a blueprint, part diary, part recipe, part kill list. 37 pages of names, incidents, and instructions. Some entries listed chemical compounds with precise measurements and temperature tolerances. Others sketched out the kitchen floor plan, with arrows marking which stations gave the best sight lines for discrete mixing. And then, the list. 17 names, each written in block capitals, the pen pressed so hard it left grooves in the paper. Above them, those who deserved a taste. Every name had a note beside it. Humiliated me, lied at the meeting, called me slow, laughed in front of others. For were crossed out, marked too late. The rest, every single one of them had been served by Marcus that day. Not one was random. Not one was collateral. It wasn't just a mass poisoning. It was a personal execution, masked as a busy lunch shift. And now, the evidence was laid bare. The vials, the burner phone, the manifesto, the list. Marcus Hale hadn't snapped in a moment of rage. He'd built this, step by step, in silence. 17 names. To Marcus Hale, they were a ledger of grievances, a list carved out of bitterness and years of quiet resentment. But to Briarwood, they were lives. Flesh and blood. People with families, routines, quirks. People who never knew their everyday choices had placed a target on their backs. Reverend Paul Mercer was first on the list. 58 years old. Pastor of St. Luke's Church for over 2 decades. Beloved for his warm laugh and off-key hymns that the congregation pretended not to notice. 2 years earlier, Marcus had applied for a janitorial position at St. Luke's. In a private exchange, Reverend Mercer expressed concerns about personal lifestyle choices and their alignment with the church's values. The job went to someone else. In Marcus's notebook, under Mercer's name, he'd written, "Sanctified hate is still hate." On the day of the massacre, Mercer sat in his usual booth, ordered his usual lunch, double cheeseburger, extra sauce, no onions, and blessed his food before eating. He was gone within the hour. Then there was Chloe Barnes, the bright-eyed, 17-year-old assistant manager who had leapfrogged Marcus for the promotion. Her laughter filled the kitchen every shift. She liked to tease Marcus, calling him Hale, like they were buddies. In his mind, it wasn't camaraderie, it was mockery. Next to her name in the manifesto were 2 stars. She'd been on the floor that day, managing the drive-through timer, oblivious to the fact that Marcus was personally assembling the tray that would kill her. Further down the list was Howard Mills, the town's elderly pharmacist. Soft-spoken, kind. The sort of man who remembered not only your prescription but your grandchildren's names. He'd sold Marcus the preservatives he would later weaponize. Howard thought he was helping with a science project. Marcus thought he'd been laughed at. In the manifesto. Smiled when I asked. Smiled too much. Howard was in the restaurant that day, grabbing a quick lunch before his afternoon shift. Marcus handed him the tray himself. Others on the list were smaller players in Marcus's world, but not in theirs. A neighbor who'd filed noise complaints. A DMV clerk who once called him a nobody under her breath. A former high school teacher who failed him for plagiarism. None of them thought their paths would cross again. None imagined those brief encounters had been cataloged, preserved, and nursed into something lethal. Every single one of them was a regular at Briarwood Burger Stop. Marcus had memorized their orders, their schedules, their habits. He waited until the right day, the right shift, the right hour. And then, he served them exactly what they asked for. Only this time, it came with something extra. 17 names became 17 funerals. And Briarwood was left with the sickening truth. This wasn't a random act of madness. It was revenge, plated and served with a smile. Briarwood was never the same after April 12th. A town that once prided itself on slow days and friendly faces woke up to find itself on every national news broadcast. But headlines can't capture what it feels like when the air in your hometown changes, when trust itself starts to rot. The Briarwood Burger Stop didn't stay standing for long. Just weeks after the massacre, the building went up in flames. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed a hooded figure slipping through the shadows at 1:11 a.m., a faint flicker of light blooming behind the restaurant's rear door. Within minutes, the whole structure was an inferno. The fire department arrived too late to save anything but the twisted steel frame of the walk-in freezer. No fingerprints. No tire tracks. The arsonist was never found. Some called it justice. Others called it cowardice. But no one mourned the building. What they mourned were the people. 17 funerals in less than a month. 17 names read in churches, printed in obituaries, whispered in grocery store aisles. Everywhere you went, there were reminders. Empty desks at the elementary school. Shops closing early because the owner just couldn't face the day. A father seen staring for hours at the playground where his son had collapsed. Fear seeped into every corner of daily life. Fast food restaurants were abandoned almost overnight. Diners cut their hours. Coffee shops saw their foot traffic cut in half. Parents packed lunches for their kids with the kind of obsessive care usually reserved for survivalists. No sharing, no cafeteria trays. Community events crumbled. The spring festival was canceled. Church picnics vanished from the calendar. Even the annual chili cook-off, Briarwood's most beloved tradition, was called off indefinitely. Because food, the thing that once brought this town together, had become a symbol of betrayal. The economy bled slowly. Within a month, 5 restaurants closed permanently. A local church moved all services online. A parents' group started a no-takeout pledge, urging families to only eat what they cooked at home. But no matter how many precautions they took, the fear lingered. Like grease on a countertop you just can't scrub clean. In the middle of Main Street, the lot where the burger stop once stood became a scar. Weeds pushed through the blackened concrete. The fence around it rattled in the wind. Some wanted it bulldozed and rebuilt. Others said it should remain untouched. A warning. In the end, they placed a single memorial stone at the center. 17 names carved into its face. No slogans. No platitudes. Just the truth, in memory of the lives lost. April 12, 2023. People still leave flowers there. And every year, on the anniversary, the church bell tolls 17 times. Each chime a reminder that silence, when left to simmer, can one day boil over and kill. The trial of Marcus Hale was not a long one. It didn't need to be. The evidence was overwhelming. The vials in the freezer. The burner phone with its unsent messages. The spiral-bound manifesto. The kill list matching every victim. And Marcus never fought it. He pled guilty to all charges without hesitation. 17 counts of first-degree murder. 11 counts of attempted murder. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air vents hum as the clerk read each victim's name. Some family members stared at Marcus as the words were spoken. Others couldn't bring themselves to look at him at all. Marcus kept his gaze straight ahead, hands at his sides, unmoving. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Marcus simply said, "No." No apology. No explanation. Nothing. The judge, a man known for his composure, paused longer than usual before speaking. His voice never rose, but his words landed like a hammer. This was not a moment of lost control. This was engineered devastation. You did not stumble into darkness, you built it. Then came the sentence. 17 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. One for each life taken. To be served back to back, not concurrently. It was a punishment designed to ensure Marcus Hale would die behind bars. In the gallery, someone sobbed. Someone else muttered, "That's it." The tension cracked like glass. The judge called for order, but the moment had already broken wide open. Some families clung to one another in silence. Others walked out without a word, unable to stay a second longer. And Marcus? He didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't even blink as he was led away in shackles. Outside, reporters shouted questions. The cameras flashed. But the man in the tan prison jumpsuit kept his eyes forward, the red visor long gone. His face as empty as it had been the day of the massacre. The law had spoken, but in Briarwood, no one called it closure. Marcus Hale entered solitary confinement on his first day in prison. The official reason, safety. The unspoken reason, no one wanted to see what silence might still be hiding inside him. He received no visitors. Answered no mail, refused meals for 2 days, then resumed eating as if nothing had happened. His cell stayed pristine, bed made, walls bare. No writing, no drawings. He never asked for a Bible, never requested news from the outside world. When prison psychiatrists requested interviews, he told them, "Everything I wanted to say is already written." There were no appeals, no petitions, no movement to reconsider. The law had locked him away for life. And Marcus seemed perfectly willing to disappear into the concrete. But Briarwood could not forget. The town that had once been defined by its slow pace and neighborly charm now had a shadow in every conversation. It was the place where 17 people had died in a fast food massacre, where trust was poisoned along with the food. Families left. Property values fell. Tourists stopped coming. Fast food chains canceled expansion plans. Local diners put signs in their windows reading, "No sauces served here." One sandwich shop even held public tastings to prove their food was safe. No one showed up. Food, the thing that once brought people together in Briarwood, had become a reminder of betrayal. The lot where the burger stop once stood became a fenced-off patch of cracked concrete. Weeds pushed through. Trash gathered against the chain link. For months, there was debate over what to do with it, tear it down and rebuild, or leave it as a scar. In the end, they placed a memorial stone in the center. Simple, heavy, unadorned. On it, only the 17 names and the date, April 12th, 2023. No slogans, no quotes, just the truth. Every year on the anniversary, the church bell tolls 17 times, each chime rolling through the streets like a wound reopening. The massacre triggered changes far beyond Briarwood. The FDA tightened restrictions on certain preservatives. State lawmakers passed new food safety and mental health protocols for large restaurant chains. But in Briarwood, those reforms felt hollow. They came too late for the 17 lives already gone. The sauce recipe Marcus had altered was permanently banned from reproduction. The formula was sealed, labeled forensic training only. Years have passed. Seasons have changed. Children have grown. But some things never fade. A mother still packs her son's lunch in front of the memorial stone every morning before school. A father still can't walk past the playground. And somewhere, behind thick prison walls, Marcus Hale sits alone, silent, steady, and waiting for nothing. Because for Briarwood, the real sentence wasn't his life behind bars. It was theirs, living with the knowledge that the man who had once handed them their lunch had been serving something else entirely.